Everything you need to know from the last day of open OTAs, including Tyrann Mathieu, who's added again, and is the New Orleans Saints secondary the strength of its defense? We got all that and a little bit of lagniappe for you on today's episode of Locked On Saints.
You are Locked On Saints, your daily New Orleans Saints podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
What is good, Who Dat Nation and Who Dat family? Welcome into this Friday episode of Locked On Saints, your daily podcast covering the New Orleans Saints, part of Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. Thanks so much as always, making Locked On Saints your first listen of the day every day. Don't forget that we are free and available on all platforms, including on YouTube as well. And I'm your host, Ross Jackson, at Ross Jackson Nola on Twitter. You can find me over at USA Today's Saints Wire, Tuesdays on Locked On NFL, and here with you every single Monday through Friday on Locked On Saints. The New Orleans Saints wrapped up their final open day to media when it came to OTAs. One more day left on the 10th on Friday today in OTAs as a whole before they move on to minicamp the 14th through the 16th. What did we learn in this last sort of space that was open to media? Well, first of all, we're going to talk a bit about Tyrann Mathieu, his impact continuing to show, whether or not the New Orleans Saints secondary is the strength of its defense, and what to expect for Michael Thomas's future as we continue to roll through the offseason, according to Dennis Allen. So I want to start off with Tyrann Mathieu here. Tyrann Mathieu back at OTAs for the third session. He was there for the first session opening up, not there for the second session, but Jarvis Landry was. Now both of them present in this third sort of leg of OTAs. And according to Nick Underhill and several others around the media, Tyrann Mathieu absolutely continuing to stand out, getting folks lined up, getting lined up all over the defense as well. We also saw Marcus Maye, according to Luke Johnson from NOLA.com, also out there. So the two safeties playing all over the defense. So be ready to see exactly what we've sort of been talking about throughout the offseason since they made both major additions at that safety spot after losing Marcus Williams and Malcolm Jenkins, last year's starting safeties. And of course, that fantastic 2017 draft pick in Marcus Williams, who's now with the Baltimore Ravens. Malcolm Jenkins, of course, having retired. Now you're in a situation where you have these new safeties that look like they're just going to play all over the field, that they're going to be everywhere. Like every now and then you'll see one of them deep, then you'll see them in the box the next snap while the other one's deep. And that type of versatility is something that the New Orleans Saints, Dennis Allen, they've always really liked in their secondary. So it feels like the versatility, the tool set of these two players fits really, really well with what the New Orleans Saints and Dennis Allen want to do over on the defensive side. In addition, like Tyrann Mathieu, of course, is huge from a leadership perspective as well. We've talked about it a bunch here on the show, and it's been talked about all over the place about the type of leader that he ends up being. And of course, you needed to kind of fill that leadership role anyway with that retirement and loss of Malcolm Jenkins. So now you have a guy that steps in and does that and kind of can do a little bit more than Malcolm Jenkins was able to do in that second stint on the field for the New Orleans Saints. Now, when he was drafted to the Saints and he was outstanding for them during that time, he played all over the place then. But in this most recent stint after coming back from the Philadelphia Eagles a few years ago, you're only really able to do so much with him. And a lot of it was having him play in the box and cover tight ends. Of course, he did more than that. He served as a pass rusher. He played some sort of split field safety responsibilities every now and then with Marcus Williams. But for the most part, his role was being on the line of scrimmage, near the line of scrimmage, or in the box, which would basically be, kind of like where the linebackers are, for instance, if you're not familiar with that term. So with that, now you get that, right? You can do all of that with Tyrann Mathieu. You can send him as a pass rusher off the edge, outside of the defensive line. You can send him up the middle as a pass rusher if you want to. You can have him play in the box and sort of play underneath zones and play that robber sort of technique where a safety comes down and takes the middle of the field, but within the first 10 yards of the line of scrimmage instead of dropping back deep, which was something they did with Malcolm Jenkins a lot. You can do all of that with Tyrann Mathieu, but now you have Tyrann Mathieu who can also play in the slot. You can line him up out wide if you need to. He can go in man coverage and follow a running back or a tight end if they motion out wide and you don't have a mismatch out there. You can send him to play a little bit of the deep safety role. We cataloged his deep safety snaps in 2021, and he wasn't Marcus Williams by any means, but he also wasn't a liability when asked to play that role. And we know that Marcus Maye, as he came into the NFL with the New York Jets a few years ago, also in 2017, actually, he, Justin Evans, and Marcus Williams, all part of the 2017 draft class as safeties, all drafted in the second round, all at some point or another either are or have been New Orleans Saints. So the Saints really liked that 2017 safety class, clearly. So then you add him to the mix. He comes in as somebody that is, started off as a pure center fielder, deep safety that you just let him take the middle of the field and he can get sideline to sideline for you. He forced, since 2017, the NFL's top forced incompletion percentage across the entire league. Second on that list was Marcus Williams. So you kind of upgraded there a little bit, right? In terms of what that statistic tells you, what that metric tells you. It doesn't tell you the whole story, but it tells you a little bit of something. And then now you have both him and Tyrann Mathieu, who have the ability to have all of this versatility. Marcus Maye has this versatility because, he came into the NFL as that sort of deep center field, deep safety guy. But Robert Saleh, when he took over in New York, he sort of had him playing in the box a lot more. And so now he has that experience as well. He played about 50% of his snaps in the box last year. So he has that experience. And now both of these guys can now be these super versatile, super multiple pieces in Dennis Allen's defense, and expect to see that, right? Like, that's not going to be uncommon at all to see all of the different places where these guys are going to play down in, down out. And the other piece that really helps you with is the fact that you can show one thing pre-snap and then roll into something completely different post-snap and change that down in and down out. So the versatility is a big part of it. The leadership's a big part of it as well. And we see Tyrann Mathieu already getting a lot of praise for his leadership, being with the team for basically a month at this point, already helping guys line up, talking over assignments, working with guys off to the sideline. So he's already stepped into that leadership role exactly like we expected that he would. So he's already showing you all of the value of that remarkably, team-friendly deal that he agreed upon to come to and come back to New Orleans. And don't forget, that contract is effectively a 2-year deal. So not only is he here this year, you're expecting him to be here next year. And according to him, he's ready for, maybe one more contract with the Saints after that to hopefully play him out throughout the rest of his career so he could finish his career as a New Orleans Saint, which would be a super cool opportunity for him to finish up his career with the same team that he celebrated in the French Quarter back in 2010 when the Saints won that 2009 season Super Bowl championship, right? Like, how cool is that? So you're seeing it all over the place from Tyrann Mathieu. You're also seeing him, coach up some of the young guys, working with the coaches, all of that. And so you're watching not only Tyrann Mathieu get into rhythm, but because of the rhythm that he's getting into, you have all these young guys that are going to kind of rise to the top when it comes to the secondary as well. And that secondary already has some really great names, not to just limit it to Tyrann Mathieu and Marcus Maye at safety. You've also got Marshon Lattimore. You've got CJ Gardner-Johnson. You've got Pauslon Adebo, who is an absolute stud his rookie year. You just added Alontae Taylor, who Kris Richard said is a kindred spirit to Pauslon Adebo. Alontae Taylor and Pauslon Adebo spending a lot of time together because Alontae Taylor sees Pauslon Adebo putting in extra work. And we'll discuss a little bit more about Kris Richard's recent statements from a conversation with Aaron Summers over at the New Orleans Saints podcast, where he talked about both of these guys, but they're getting along super well. You've also got PJ Williams, who can play all over the place. You've got CJ Gardner-Johnson, who can play all over the place. You got Justin Evans, who's a big-time hitter. Smoke Monday, who you just added, a guy that should have been drafted. I mean, there's so many different pieces in this secondary. I didn't even name Bradley Roby and Bryce Thompson, Vincent Gray, who continues to make some plays. Dylan Mabin's made some plays in OTAs as well. Like, there's just so many players on the secondary, and all of them now get the benefit of working with Tyrann Mathieu through OTAs. Come minicamp, they'll get the opportunity to continue to work with Marshon Lattimore as well, who knows the system. He's effectively the senior player now when it comes to the system outside of PJ Williams. So he's a big-time leader. Everyone now has the opportunity to continue to rise within that secondary, which leads me to my question for today's show. Who is, or what is, the strongest unit on the defensive side, and why is it the secondary? We'll break it all down as we continue on with today's episode of Locked On Saints. And before we get to that, I want to tell you a little bit about our friends over at Bet Online. You hear me talk about them all the time. They are our exclusive online betting partners here on the Locked On Podcast Network, your number one source for all sports wagering information, everything that you need. Here are a couple of odds that you can bet on that are New Orleans Saints related. Right now, Chris Olave has actually fallen down the list a little bit for Offensive Rookie of the Year. He's now tied for second with Breece Hall, the running back that was drafted to the New York Jets, behind Kenny Pickett, quarterback of the Pittsburgh Steelers. Now, you knew eventually the quarterback was going to lead this list, but Chris Olave spent quite a bit of the early portion of this offseason, leading the way as Offensive Rookie of the Year. He's in second place now at plus 900. You can get in on that. You can also check out the NFC South rankings for the New Orleans Saints. Second place is the favorite for them right now at plus 110, but first place plus 375. Maybe you're as confident as Emory Hunt was just a few days ago. The Saints are going to win the division. You might want to get in on that one. Plus 375, some nice odds for you. Win total right now, the Saints are actually up a little bit at 8.5 wins. They were down at 7.5. So they're going to be a 9-win team. Maybe you think they're going to be a double-digit win team like I do. That's an easy over for me. And then week 1, they open up against Atlanta as -5 favorites on the road. So big-time favorites on the road. So you can check out all that, as well as the NBA Finals, UFC, MMA, boxing, and even esports over at Bet Online, where you can get in on all of the action. So you can check them out on your mobile device or on your desktop. That way you can get in on all the trends and action that are going on. Check them out, Bet Online, where the game starts. All right, family, continuing on with today's episode of Locked On Saints. Thanks again for making us your first listen of the day every day. Don't forget that we're free and available on all platforms, available to you wherever it is that you get your podcast, and on YouTube as well, and more on the way. Can't wait to tell you about what we have coming up here soon. The Locked On Podcast Network, Tegna, WWL, all the things that we've got going on. But first, I want to tell you about our listener survey. If you want to contribute, help us out a little bit, tell us what you like, what you don't like, what you want more of, what you want less of, all of that here on the Locked On Podcast Network. You can head over to lockedonpodcasts.com/survey, take the survey, and it's going to enter you to be one of 10 folks to potentially win a $100 Ticketmaster gift card. Get yourself some Saints tickets this year as well. So you can check that out over at lockedonpodcasts, plural.com/survey. All right. Thank you for your help with that. Now, as we continue on with today's episode, I want to talk a little bit, I want to break down over on the defensive side here and ask the question, is the secondary the strongest unit for the New Orleans Saints defense? And I think as of right now, it's hard to argue that it isn't. You look at the linebackers right now, you've got Demario Davis, you've got Pete Werner, who made some nice plays in OTAs and is somebody that the Saints are clearly expecting to step into a starting role next to Demario Davis. I know Emory feels really good about DeMarco Jackson potentially stepping in there, but the positions are a little bit different. The responsibilities are a little bit different. I think Pete Werner is going to be that guy. You look at the defensive line, edge rusher has potential. To be the strongest unit. It has more than potential. It's got productivity, right? Cam Jordan is one of the best to do it in the NFL as an edge defender, which means not just a pass rusher, but also as a run stopper, also as somebody that contributes to the success of others on the defensive line, right? Like it's a little bit more of a broader term edge defender that I think better encapsulates all of what Cam Jordan does. Marcus Davenport's turning into that guy, 9.5 sacks last season, or 9 sacks last season. Carl Granderson continues to develop. Peyton Turner, if he comes back healthy, that's a first-round talent for you that you got out of the University of Washington. That was basically, I mean, he's a guy that measurable-wise compares to Marcus Davenport, but maybe has the opportunity to come into the NFL a little bit more polished, having a pass rush plan, having multiple pass rush moves that he knows how to string together, all of those things. So if we can get him back out on the field, if you're the New Orleans Saints, and that ends up helping you out a ton to bolster that unit. And he's talking about how like he's breathing on the glass, like watching those guys out there while he's rehabbing, like I want to be out there, I want to go, I want to get out there. So that's pretty cool, like to see him so excited and juiced to get back out there as quickly as possible. And then finally, of course, you've got guys like Taco Charlton as well as Tano Passanio, who actually was with the team last year, dealt with some injuries. Passanio I see as somebody that gives you the versatility of being inside out, right? He's edge defender, but can also play in the interior for you. So Taco Charlton, you just kind of have to see if he's able to revitalize his career with another team, which he's a very talented player, and there's absolutely no doubt about that. Defensive interior, you got David Onyemata, but then you've got question marks after him. You got a lot of young talent behind him and Shai Tuttle, basically. So you have to kind of see exactly which way that goes. Oh, and some new faces, right? In Kentavious Street, as well as Jaleel Johnson, who was recently added earlier on in the offseason. So for me, the secondary is the strongest unit. It's the strength of the defense. And if you've been a New Orleans Saints fan for a long time, maybe a little bit hard for you to kind of imagine that, right? Like that hasn't always been the case. I mean, you think back to the early Patrick Robinson days, along with like, Brandon Browner and so on and so forth. Like some of those secondaries were tough to watch, particularly during those 7 and 9 seasons, 2014, 15, and 16. And then you look at the secondaries that you had since then, to where you had, Von Bell as the safety partner with Marcus Williams. And then eventually Von Bell left, but then you brought in Kurt Coleman, and Kurt Coleman didn't really pan out. Then you brought back Malcolm Jenkins. And so, you kind of had to figure things out a little bit, but then you were also trying to figure out, okay, who's going to be that guy opposite Marshon Lattimore? You went through Ken Crawley, Eli Apple, and then eventually you finally landed on, then you got, Janoris Jenkins, which really helped. And then you eventually landed on Pauslon Adebo now, who looks like he's, set to be that starter opposite Marshon Lattimore for the future, unless Alontae Taylor is able to challenge him for it. Then you look at the guys that don't even hit the field on the first play. Oh, and plus CJ Gardner-Johnson in the slot for you, who's like the best nickel corner in the NFL. Then we haven't even gotten to the guys that don't even get out on the field in terms of what those starting five, if you will, are. Bradley Roby, who's a seasoned veteran. PJ Williams, who can play any position you want him to. You look at a player like Justin Evans, who has a ton of experience during his days in Tampa Bay, can kind of do a little bit of everything, big time hitter, played extremely well in terms of college football, played extremely well in the NFL too, but just dealt with those really unfortunate ankle injuries and foot injuries and things like that. So if he's able to come back and be healthy, then all of a sudden he steps into a role that becomes very important for you as well. So there's a lot of opportunity here for the New Orleans Saints and that secondary to really kind of get into rhythm. And then if you have second round pick Alontae Taylor, who could come in and end up, disrupting a little bit in terms of what the lineup is. And if nothing else, he gives you quality depth as a developing cornerback and as a core special teamer. And, I mentioned this a moment ago. Oh, and then of course, JT Gray, who's a core special teamer for you, but isn't really a liability at safety either. And then you add Tyrann Mathieu and Marcus Maye to this group this year. Hard to argue that they're not the best part of the Saints defense this season. So Kris Richard, who is the co-defensive coordinator and also secondary coach for the New Orleans Saints, joined Aaron Summers over on the Locked On Saints podcast, on the New Orleans Saints podcast. Really great listen. You can hear from him and as well as assistant head coach and special teams coordinator Darren Rizzi in that interview. And he talked a little bit about what it is that makes guys like Pauslon Adebo so special. And one of the things he talked about was maturation. How quickly they came in, all these players, because you mentioned Alontae Taylor in this same group. His experience with Marshon Lattimore has been, pushing towards that idea of maturation as well. That has been something that, like, these guys have walked into the system ready to go, like wanting to do the extra work, wanting to learn more, wanting to do all this. And not only doing that, but also wanting to teach others. He talked a little bit about how, like, if you can't teach a sixth grader something, how well do you really know it? And he clarified, of course, it doesn't mean to say that any of his players are sixth graders, but he's just saying, if you can't teach it, do you really know it? And so it kind of builds into what he calls the each one teach one culture of the New Orleans Saints defense, that everybody can teach everybody. And if you listen back a few years ago to one of Malcolm Jenkins' early press conferences with the team, he talked about how, yeah, he's doing some mentoring for other players, but he's also learning stuff from younger players as well when it comes to learning the system. So there is no ego in terms of all that like everyone is helping everyone. Pauslon Adebo is in his second year in the NFL, and he's working with Alontae Taylor to help make him better. Like, that's really, really cool. That's a really, really cool sign for this New Orleans Saints secondary. So yeah, the secondary as a whole, when you just look at the names across the board, very, very strong. But their ability to help each other and and put yourself in that situation, Kris Richard was talking about, that iron sharpens iron sort of mentality. That's a really good way to watch all these guys continue to develop. And then now they get to line up across from Michael Thomas, Jarvis Landry, and Chris Olave, hopefully by the time that we get to training camp. And then they get even better, right? They all help each other get better at that point. Then they go and they take on the Green Bay Packers in the first week or the second week of the preseason, and they'll do some practices in Green Bay with that. So then they're working against that receiving core, and they're working against Aaron Rodgers and all that. So it just gets better and better. Well, it probably won't be working against Aaron Rodgers in that practice. I don't know. We'll see. But hopefully they get that opportunity. So I think, yeah, the New Orleans Saints secondary is the strongest portion of their defense going into 2022. There's a symbiotic relationship between coverage and pass rush. If the pass rush can start to get home, it makes the secondary better. If the secondary holds its own, then the pass rush gets home, right? Like, they help each other in that way. And then you need the linebackers to be able to support to shut down the middle of the field. But honestly, they're in a really good situation here to roll a lot of like dime defenses out if they want to this season, to put 6 DBs out on the field. And then they could still roll with 2 linebackers and 3 different defensive linemen, or they can go 4 defensive linemen and DeMario Davis at linebacker, and then have like Tyrann Mathieu play in the box or Justin Evans play in the box. Like, there's a lot of opportunities for them to really be able to mix and match what their looks look like, especially knowing you've got Tom Brady already talking about how it's going to be a pass-heavy offense in Tampa Bay, and that Russell Gage is an important piece to it. So you're talking about 3 wide receivers on the field in that case. behind Chris Godwin and Mike Evans, depending upon how quickly Chris Godwin's able to get back from his injury. So you're going up against a lot of 11 personnel. You can imagine that you're going to be going up against a lot of 4 wide receiver sets as well, but you're also going to be up against even an 11 personnel where you've got 3 wide receivers on the field. You still got 4 pass catchers because you have a tight end to worry about there too. So with all of that, it's reasonable to expect that the Saints are pretty comfortable with what their secondary looks like by getting more of those secondary players out on the field. And with that being the case, yes, they are the strongest unit for the New Orleans Saints, but they have the room to get even better. Now, in order for them to really step into that iron sharpens iron against Michael Thomas has to get out on the field. Dennis Allen told us a little bit about what it is that he expects from Michael Thomas. We'll break that down. Should you expect to see him at minicamp? Should you expect to see him at training camp still? We got some updates. Seems Dennis Allen's pretty pleased with his progress. We'll go through that, and I'll tell you a little bit about my plans to make sure that you're getting all the best Saints coverage over the course of training camp. We got that coming up for you as we continue on and wrap up today's episode of Locked On Saints. Let's get it, Who Dat Nation. Wrapping up today's episode of Locked On Saints. Thank you so much, as always, for being here with us. Don't forget to go and check out Jake Madison, Locked On Pelicans, as well, so you know everything going on with your New Orleans Pelicans, especially with the NBA draft right around the corner. So Dennis Allen met with New Orleans Saints media today, said farewell to our good friend Amy Just, who's headed to Nebraska to take over as the sports columnist there. Big time move, big time promotion for her. We're very, very excited for her, but also took some time to give a little bit of an update on where the progress was when it comes to Michael Thomas. And so basically, Dennis Allen tells us that Michael Thomas is going to be doubtful when it comes to mandatory minicamp. And I think that's okay, because there was never really any expectation built around the idea that Michael Thomas was going to be present at minicamp, right? Every sign has pointed to training camp being the day that you start to see him back out on the field. So I don't think, and this is the big takeaway, that there's anything to worry about at this time, even hearing that he's doubtful for minicamp, because I think even hearing that he's doubtful for minicamp as opposed to out for minicamp is actually better news than it is bad news, right? But there would be no reason to really expect him to be out there. And honestly, keep him on ice until you're ready to go. There's a long offseason ahead. And that's something else that Dennis Allen mentioned. After saying that he's pretty good with where Michael Thomas is, he wishes he was 100%, but he's just simply not there at that point. But they have, a long, long opportunity here. He said he's busting his tail to get ready to go. He feels like he's making significant progress. We want to get him healthy. And look, we have a long time before we play a game. And that's exactly the right attitude. That's exactly the right attitude. The last thing you want to do is rush this guy out on the field. Right? Nick Underhill has said it. Many other people have said it, that getting Michael Thomas back is the biggest move for the New Orleans Saints this offseason, behind maybe, or not even behind, but second to that would be getting Will Lutz back this offseason, who was out there kicking today, which is great. Or Thursday. Sorry, I'm recording Thursday night. So that's a really, really good sign for the Saints that they're not trying to rush this situation, right? We see him sprinting in the training facility, which means it's very likely a part of the regimen, he's operating within the confines of what the Saints' recovery plan for him is, which is really important because this is the first time we've seen that, right? This is the first time that he's been in recovery for this injury in the Saints facility. So hearing that there's an expectation at all, and that there's even, that little glimpse when you say doubtful versus, nah, he ain't gonna be there, fam. That's a really, really good sign in and of itself. But don't expect to see Michael Thomas at minicamp, and that's okay. However, do expect to see everybody else at minicamp that's not recovering from injury, right? And so that could mean that maybe Peyton Turner doesn't make it yet. That could mean that Landon Young doesn't make it yet. That could mean that Marcus Davenport isn't ready yet. But Dennis Allen did say that he expects full attendance at minicamp. Participation is a different thing, but full attendance at minicamp. And I know a lot of people were concerned about the number of veterans that have not been present when it comes to the Saints OTAs, but it seems that that was just part of the voluntary process. Everybody's cool with that. Dennis Allen has said repeatedly that he's perfectly comfortable with the reasons that people have been away. No qualms about it. Remember, Jarvis Landry wasn't there for the first week because he was attending his kid's graduation, right? So there's these things that we don't know about, right? That keep these players away. There are others that are in the midst of recovery. And there are others like maybe DeMario Davis, for instance, who is accustomed to getting ready for the season now without OTAs because there have been no OTAs when it comes to the New Orleans Saints for the past 2 years. So it's not a big deal that they were away. During mandatory minicamp, though, you want to see them there. And the expectation is that everyone will be present, according to Dennis Allen, though I'm sure there are some minor caveats to that: injury recovery, unavailability, things like that. So usually, like I said, I like to try to close the show out. And one of the things I want to do this offseason is close out with a 2-minute take, something that you can respond to, something that we can have conversation about. instead of doing that today, what I want to do is talk about my offseason plan, just so that you know kind of what's coming up here on the show and how I'm hoping to bring you the best Saints coverage that I can throughout the offseason. And then we're going to get to defensive roster projections on Monday. So we didn't skip that. We just pushed that so we could talk about OTA stuff. So here's my plan. I haven't been able to be at OTAs. I'm not going to be able to be at mandatory minicamp either, though mandatory minicamp is open to the public. There are some dates that are open to the public, so make sure you check that out over on the Saints website, because maybe you can go. And the reason for that is because I've been in the midst of like getting ready for a move and all that stuff. I am back in New Orleans on Juneteenth. Shout out, come and say hi in Congo Square on Juneteenth, by the way, because you know I'm going to be out there. My plan is to be there for training camp and to make sure that I'm putting out like as quickly as possible an observations episode each day. I might even do that live on YouTube, depending upon where I'm able to do it from. Do that. Make sure you get immediate observations. And then that evening, put out an episode that breaks down like the 3 major observations from each day of training camp. So still expect Monday through Friday episodes, but there might be, if there's a training camp practice on a Saturday or training camp practice on the weekend or something like that, then it would just mean an extra episode. That's all. I wouldn't like move a day or anything like that. Like, I'm not going to do that. We're going Monday through Friday no matter what, but you might get some Saturday, Sunday stuff, and you may even start getting like 2 episodes per day. So even if I do that live on YouTube, I'll still take the audio, post it on the podcast side so that everybody can hear it on your favorite podcast apps as well. So nobody's getting left out. I'm not going to do any type of like exclusive content or anything like that that ends up, missing some of you. I'm going to try to do extra content. I'm going to try to make sure that it gets to everybody. So that's my plan. If you have questions, if you have suggestions, if you have things that you want to hear about, let me know. You have several ways to get in touch with me. My Twitter handles, @RossJacksonNola. You can leave a comment on YouTube if you're writing on YouTube. You can comment you can write to me on Facebook. Like, there's so many different ways to get in touch with me. So let me know, because I want to make sure that I'm bringing you content that you want and making sure that I'm bringing you content that you find of value. I always want to do the show that you want, not just the show I want to do, because sometimes those things aren't the same, right? So I want to make sure I'm always talking about what you're talking about or what you want to hear about. So on Monday, defensive roster projections, an early look, kind of setting the table for the 53-man roster. Coming up on Tuesday, we'll continue to wrap up things, look ahead to minicamp, and then Wednesday, Thursday, Friday, somewhere in there, we're looking at interviews. So that's the plan for next week, and then we roll into a whole bunch more off-season stuff. We'll get into fun stories. We'll get into like Saints history, all that other stuff. So we'll have a whole bunch coming up for you. I'm super, super, super excited for the off-season here with all of you, and I thank you very much, as always, for making me your first listen of the day every day. For your second listen, make sure you go, and I always point to the wrong side. If y'all saw that on YouTube, don't make fun of me. Do make fun of me. It's funny. Make sure your second listen is Locked on NFL. Get all the information and news you need around the league in less than 30 minutes. I appreciate you, as always, making me a part of your day. I will see y'all on Monday, but if you need more in between these episodes on your New Orleans Saints, make sure you're following along on Twitter @RossJacksonNola. Hit me up. Let me know how the family's doing. Let me know how you're living. Let me know how you're momming them. And trust you, that nation. I'll holla at you.